Noel is an edgy young man who wants to become the world's strongest seeker, but he gets stuck with the weakest support class possible, a talker. In this world, there are phenomena called abyss that are connected to the depths of hell, and on this godforsaken day, matchmaking was busted so Noel's village got attacked by level 12 demons. Noel's grandfather is the only one in the village who has the skills to put up a fight against the demons, so he grabs his axe and tells Noel to stay hidden while he holds off the demons until help arrives. However, Noel knows there's no way help is coming for them in a situation like this, and fighting all those demons alone is a death sentence. He doesn't believe his grandpa can make it back alive from something like that, but his grandpa assures him that he can handle it. After all, he has defeated a level 13 demon before, and people don't call him over death for nothing. After that, he went out to face the demons, and while he may have put up a good fight and taken out a bunch of demons, Grandpa still got cooked so bad that his legs are in a different time zone. Noel rushes to his side, and Grandpa apologizes for not being strong enough to survive like he promised, but he had no choice if he wanted to protect the village. This is the fate all Seekers are doomed to because of the life of combat they've dedicated themselves to. Grandpa asks if Noel is going to follow his footsteps even after witnessing the dangers of the job, and with tears in his eyes, Noel declares that he will become the most powerful Seeker in the world, and Noel promises to become the world's strongest Seeker to carry on his grandpa's legacy. We then cut to present day when Noel has fulfilled his promise and became a Seeker to follow in his grandpa's footsteps. And although he's giving his teammates orders, he is far from the strongest on the team since he possesses the weakest support class, the Talker. The monsters Noel's team has been fighting are called lesser vampires, and they can't use magic, but they are troublesome to deal with since the Vampire Queen can reproduce in a short amount of time and give rise to a new army. Noel warns his party members not to let their guard down, because the lesser vampires are still insanely strong and they can continue fighting even when severely injured, so each one needs to be double tapped. The party continues through the dungeon, and Walter asks Noel if they can just ignore all the lesser vampires and head straight for the Queen, so they can complete the mission quickly. However, Noel tells him that that is a dumb idea since they would end up being surrounded by lesser vampires while they fight the Queen. This mission is already difficult enough for a C-rank party like them to handle, so recklessly charging forward would surely get them killed. Walter gets the message, but he sarcastically says he is only listening to Noel because he is the important talker of the party. As a talker, Noel is able to enhance his party members with buff words, but his personal strength is far below average and it really frustrates him. So Noel turns around and is about to roast the self-confidence out of Walter. However, before he can say anything, he notices a lesser vampire camping on the ceiling, and it's definitely planning something, so he orders his team to take cover. Just then, the vampire releases a poisonous cloud, and Noel is caught right in the middle of it. The others see that Noel is in danger, so they want to rush over and save him. But before they can act, they get attacked by the vampire and Tanya gets knocked down. Walter and Lloyd try to stop the demon, but without Noel's buffs, they are much weaker than they were before, so Walter pleads with Noel to snap out of it and give them some orders. Noel hears this, and he has a flashback to the day his grandpa died, so he swears to himself that he won't let anyone else die and pulls out a gun to fire several shots at the demon while also drinking a health potion to recover from the poison. He may not have the same kind of strength his grandfather did, but that doesn't mean he is completely useless, and he plans to showcase just how important a talker can be. He activates his Talker Tactician skill, and now when he gives his teammates orders, their abilities are boosted by 25%. He then uses his Battle Voice skill, and is able to increase the stamina and mana of his team. With Noel's help, the team is now able to hold their ground, but above them, Tanya spots 3 more demons, and she starts freaking out, so Noel uses one of his skills to get her to calm down. If everything goes according to plan from here, Noel predicts that the team should be able to finish the monsters off in 74 seconds, so he tells the others that he will handle the rest of the lesser vampires, so they should focus on taking down the Queen and prepare to use their strongest attacks. As the lesser of vampires attack Noel, he uses a speech technique and yells at them to make them freeze in place, and once they are unable to move, he uses his magic gun to shoot an ice bullet and encase them in a block of ice. Unfortunately, one of the lesser vampires managed to dodge the attack, but he still has 1 bullet left in the chamber, so he has the option of freezing the last lesser vampire to save himself. However, he decides to fire the bullet at the Queen to distract it and provide an opening for his teammates instead. Thanks to this, Walter and Lloyd are able to hit the Queen with their ultimate moves and take it down. But when Tanya turns to Noel to celebrate their victory, she is horrified as she sees him getting stabbed by the lesser vampire. Fortunately, it turns out that Noel wasn't really stabbed, as he perfectly calculated things to make sure he would survive. He knew that once the queen was defeated, all the lesser vampires would naturally stop moving, and there was just enough time for him to avoid being killed. With this, the team has successfully cleared the dungeon and the surrounding abyss dissipates. Noel's teammates come over to check on him, and while they know he planned it all carefully, they still scold him for recklessly endangering his life like that. Noel thinks back to the day when he first learned that he was a talker, and he was crying his eyes out because he wanted to be a warrior like his grandpa. His grandpa told him not to worry about it since regardless of his class, he is sure Noel will grow up to become the world's strongest seeker because he could sense incredible talent within him. Ever since that day, Noel hasn't been discouraged by his support class and remains determined to become the world's strongest seeker, even though he's just a talker. After their mission is complete, the party has to head back to Etria, the capital of the Velnet Empire, so they can report their success. The Empire is more susceptible to abyss attacks than other nations, so to fight this, the Empire developed magical technology using the materials they acquired from the demons. The material used to develop this technology can only be acquired with the help of Seekers, so Seekers are admired by the public for their contributions to society. Noel officially became a Seeker when he was 15, so he moved to the capital and found himself some companions since he couldn't fight alone as a Seeker. Walter over here is the warrior of the party, Tanya is the healer, and Loy is the swordsman. So although Noel would love to have a scout as well, all in all, their team is pretty balanced. Walter notices that Noel is being really quiet for some reason, so he asks if something is wrong. The party got a reward of 5 million Phil for completing the quest, so Walter asks if Noel is upset that they didn't negotiate for more money. He then tells Noel that a Seeker shouldn't get so hung up on money, and that his grandpa probably would have said the same thing, but on the contrary, the first lesson Grandpa taught Noel was that no matter what he does, he better be getting paid top dollar because he can't be risking his life just to go home broke at the end of the day. With that being said, Noel definitely wanted a higher reward, and he couldn't care less about what Walter thinks, but he will let it go just this once. Tanya tells Walter to quit bothering Noel, but he still insists that Noel should show him more respect since he is 2 years older than him. Noel retorts that age means nothing among Seekers, as the only thing that will earn you respect is your strength, and Noel is starting to question if Walter is really competent enough to be respected. Walter blows up and yells that Noel is the only one here who is incompetent because all he ever does is give orders from the back while the rest of them risk their lives on the front line. Noel thought he had a good dynamic with the team, but now he realizes that they all see him as a burden despite all the things he does for them. But before addressing that, he insults Walter one more time and is about to start a fight with him. However, Lloyd steps in and separates the two of them before anything bad happens. He then changes the subject and suggests that they call it a day and start splitting up their rewards. A little while later, they are all sitting by the fountain and Tanya is disappointed with how little she ended up getting after such a difficult mission. Lloyd explains that after all the equipment costs and taxes they had to pay, there was only 1 million Phil left, so each team member only gets 250,000. He agrees that it's frustrating, but their party's funds are steadily increasing, so he's sure they'll make more money the next time they get a big mission like this. Noel points out that there isn't going to be a next time because they almost never get big missions because clans get all the high-profile abysses, and even when they do get the missions, they will be forced to pay a penalty fee if they fail to clear it on their own, so it's not sustainable. That aside, Noel asks Lloyd how much money their party has in its joint funds account. Lloyd tells him they have 12.8 million saved up, so Noel suggests that the team should invest that money in forming their own clan. Everyone is shocked that he would suggest such a thing, and Lloyd tries explaining all the reasons why they can't do that, mainly because they would be required to pay 20 million to the country in order to set one up, and they don't have that much money. However, Noel isn't deterred and says he is willing to use 7.2 million of his personal money to make up the difference. He knows it's an expensive decision, but he assures everyone that in the long run, they'll gain much more money since they won't be limited to the leftover quests anymore. Lloyd then points out that they would need to acquire a base of operations within the capital, and rent prices are outrageous nowadays. However, Noel's already got that covered and found a cheap building for their team to rent. Tanya then chimes in and mentions that they are all still C-rank newbies, so they couldn't possibly handle running a clan, but Noel doesn't think that's a good excuse to avoid forming a clan. If they don't take the leap now, then they'll never be ready to run a clan on their own. Noel has been studying all about how to run a clan, so he knows all about the necessary procedures that need to be taken. The only thing he doesn't have is experience, and the only way to get clan experience is to start a clan. So while it may be difficult, there's no other way. Noel makes a good point, but even so, Lloyd still believes they won't be given any good jobs since they have proven themselves to be trustworthy. But that's where Lloyd is wrong. Noel can guarantee that they will be given a bunch of good jobs, and it has nothing to do with them being trustworthy. They are going to get jobs because they are hot. This country wants more seekers, and a great seeker is considered both a hero and an idol. So the country will naturally treat them better because they are good looking. Tanya doesn't think it's a good idea since they would practically be selling themselves, but Walter is already sold on the idea because he has been getting sick of the mediocre life they've been living. He wants to experience fame and wealth, and there's nothing Tanya can say that will talk him out of it. Walter and Noel are in agreement on this, so Noel asks Lloyd what his opinion is as the leader of the party. If Lloyd wants to say no, then Noel is prepared to quit the party and take his share of the savings so he can form a clan with someone else because he has a dream to become the strongest seeker, and he won't let anything get in his way. Lloyd gets a dark look in his eyes as he is left with no choice but to accept Noel's demands. However, he suggests they discuss the details of this clan formation the day after tomorrow. Walter is fine with that, and Noel is glad he was able to get Tanya and Lloyd on board with his idea, so he leaves to rest for the night. However, later that day, Walter comes running to Noel with terrible news as he has just discovered that Lloyd and Tanya have betrayed them and disappeared with all the money. After Noel reads the letter, he confirms what happened. Lloyd invested all his money in NFTs a couple years back, and now he is in a deep pile of debt. So he embezzled the party's money to pay off his debt and fled the capital before he could be found out. Noel finds this whole thing insanely funny since Lloyd always upheld the act of a noble and chivalrous person. But getting down to business, Noel asks Walter when and where he found this letter. Walter explains that he heard about a really good job last night, so he headed to Lloyd's room first thing in the morning to tell him about it. But by the time he arrived, Lloyd had already cleaned out his room, and that's when the innkeeper showed him the letter. According to the innkeeper, Lloyd and Tanya left the inn around 8 p.m. last night, just before the city gates closed, and under normal circumstances, neither Noel nor Walter would have found out about this until the following afternoon, so Lloyd was trying to buy as much time as possible before the escape. It's 9:30 in the morning now, so while they may have found out sooner than Lloyd expected, it has still been over half a day, so he and Tanya must have covered a considerable distance by now. However, the gates must have records of which direction they were headed in, and they most likely left on foot, so Noel and Walter should be able to catch up if they take a horse. Walter is eager to get going, but Noel reminds him that this isn't as simple as chasing after them and getting the money back. Those two chose to abandon their party, and that's a definite betrayal, so worst case, if they catch up and confront them, it'll become a battle to the death. And even if they do beat Lloyd and Tanya, it would be a waste of time because Lloyd already spent all their money, but that doesn't mean Noel is going to let them get away without suffering for what they did. After getting dressed, Noel takes Walter down to the local tavern, but Walter doesn't understand why they are here. Noel doesn't want to waste time explaining the plan to Walter since he's too dumb to understand it anyway, so he just tells him to follow his lead. Noel heads inside and immediately gets the attention of everyone in the tavern. He tells them that 2 members of his party have stolen his party's money and escaped the capital, so he's willing to pay 2 million fils to anyone who can bring them back alive. Walter starts freaking out and asks Noel why he went and announced their predicament to the entire tavern, but Noel says there's a particular person he's looking for, so he just did this to save time. The first party to accept Noel's mission is the Lightning Bite Party, so Noel gives the leader all the information he has about Lloyd and Tanya's escape, and soon after, several more parties decide to take the job, but Noel still hasn't found the person he was looking for. All of a sudden, a shady-looking man approaches Noel about his job offer, and this guy looks like he knows something, which is what Noel was waiting for. They head outside to talk, and the man explains that he saw a couple leaving town yesterday, and they perfectly match the description Noel gave. He's sure he knows where they are headed. The only problem is that the man's party isn't strong enough to defeat Lloyd and Tanya on their own, so Noel offers to help, but he will only be paying the man 1 million in exchange. The man tries to argue for the 2 million, but Noel has already read him like a book, so he knows that the man is too broke to turn down the 1 million. Eventually, the man caves in and agrees to the terms, so Noel tells him to get his party ready and meet him at the south gate. He also tells Walter to wait for him there because Noel has something he needs to do first. A little while later, Noel is done with his preparations, so he meets everyone at the front gate, and Walter has something he has been meaning to talk to Noel about. He wants to know if Noel is going to be alright fighting Lloyd and Tanya, but Noel has no reservations about it. and you will gladly kill them with no mercy whatsoever. Walter can't believe Noel feels nothing after they were partners for so long, but from the day they met, Noel had already come up with contingency plans to take them down if they ever betrayed him. He even has a plan to take down Walter, so never actually trusted any of them to begin with, and Walter could stand be less trusting in the future. Later that day, in a remote village, Lloyd and Tanya are walking, and Lloyd assures her that they should be safe for now, so they can rest easy tonight. He is sure that there is no way Noel would be petty enough to come after them even though the money has already been spent, but Lloyd gravely underestimated how petty Noel really is because he appears behind them, along with a full squad of people to capture them. Lloyd is about to draw his sword to fight, but Noel uses his ability to tell him not to move, and both he and Tanya are stunned in place. Now that Lloyd has nowhere left to run, Walter begins yelling at him for his betrayal. However, before he can punch Lloyd's face in, Noel says there's something he wants to ask. He knows that Lloyd already spent all the party's savings, but the money they got paid for the vampire hunt must still be in his possession, right? Lloyd denies having the money and says he used that as well, so Noel asks if he spent it on another failed NFT business, but Lloyd admits that he used the money to pay back his debts. The way Lloyd answers gives Noel all the information he needs, so he now realizes that Lloyd is a serial gambler. He must have gambled so much that he ended up in trouble with some debt collectors, but Noel wants to hear it from Lloyd's mouth. Lloyd is about to apologize again, but Walter cuts him off and yells at him for gambling away all the money they worked hard to save. Lloyd gives up on the innocent act and tells back that he is the real victim here. He didn't want to touch the party's money, but gambling was so much fun, and besides, it was their own fault for dumping the responsibility of leading on his shoulders. At this point, Noel has heard enough BS, so he kicks Lloyd in the face and starts stomping on him for thinking he could get away with such half-ass blame shifting. He was the one who said he wanted to become the leader, all just so he could find his gambling addiction. Before long, Lloyd has been beaten bloody, and he is begging for forgiveness, but Noel has never heard of such a word, so he will gladly be at Lloyd 1,000 times until he is satisfied. Tanya speaks up and begs Noel to spare Lloyd, and Noel says fine, but only if she's willing to take the beating in his place. Noel is a proud believer of gender equality, so he has no problem curb stomping her if that's what she really wants. He uses his power and tells her to confess her involvement, and once she is compelled to tell the truth, she admits that she gambled the party's money with Lloyd, and in fact, she's even more of a gambling addict than Lloyd is. The move Noel just used forces the target to reveal the absolute truth no matter what for a short amount of time. And once Tanya regains her senses, she yells at Noel for daring to use mind control on her because it is against Imperial law. Noel agrees and says she is right about it being illegal to use mind control for personal reasons, but right now she is the criminal here, so Noel's use of mind control is considered interrogation and is perfectly legal. Now that Noel is done talking to the traitors, the man asks Noel for his payment, and Noel agrees to pay him, but he just needs a minute first. The man doesn't like being told to wait, so he grabs Noel and accuses him of trying to scam them out of the money, but Noel drags the man to the floor and assures him that he will be paid for his work, so he should just be quiet and wait. The man is pissed, so he draws his knife and is about to attack Noel, but threatening Noel was the worst mistake he could have made because Noel immediately knocks him unconscious with a punch to the chest. Noel had learnt this technique from his grandpa by experiencing it firsthand. It is a strong blow directly to the area above the heart and can temporarily paralyze the heart muscles, causing even the most experienced seekers to faint if done properly. Noel's grandpa wanted him to learn this technique because as a talker, he can't buff himself, so this would at least give him some offensive ability. The man's teammates drag his unconscious body out of the road, and soon enough, a friend of Noel's pulls up in a fancy carriage. The man is an infamous slave trader, Finocchio Barzini, and he seems to be on good terms with Noel. He is the leader of the Barzini family, and Noel knows him to be quite eccentric and zesty, but he's the only one that can help him out, so he had to contact him. If it wasn't obvious yet, Noel intends to sell Lloyd and Tanya to Finocchio as slaves in order to make back the money they stole from him. Tanya protests, but Noel reminds her that he could always just turn her into the police, and jail time here means she will be sent down to the mines. And let me tell you, the mines are not fun. They'd have a much higher chance of surviving if they become slaves and hopefully get bought by a kind master. With that said, Noel asks Finocchio to begin evaluating the two for sale, but when he's done, Finocchio only offers to buy them for $6 million. Noel says that isn't enough, and Finocchio apologizes, but this is a bad time for him, so he can't offer any more than this. The Holy Cross Church is about to decree that everyone must take a vow of poverty, so if Finocchio offered top dollar for the Lloyd and Tanya, it would draw too much attention, and he would like to avoid that. Noel didn't realize the church held so much influence over a family as powerful as the Benazzi family, but it doesn't matter. He says he will accept 11 million as payment, and it takes a while for Finocchio to realize, but when he does, he starts yelling about Noel trying to get an extra 5 million. Because of the constant yelling, Noel keeps increasing the price until he is eventually asking for 15 million when Finocchio initially only offers 6. Finocchio was starting to get really pissed off, but Noel tells him that if he buys the two for 15 million, he will tell everyone that Finocchio only paid 13 million instead. The church's decree just means Finocchio can't buy things that are overpriced, but if he claims that Lloyd and Tanya are genuinely worth the money, people will be lining up to buy them solely because they are expensive. If Finocchio plays his cards right, he might even be able to sell them for as high 90 million. Finocchio is insanely impressed by how cunning Noel is, so he offers him a leadership position in his family, but Noel turns him down. Finocchio understands and he is on board with the deal, but before he finalizes things, he hoes over to the scruffy guy and his party to warn them not to say a word about any of this unless they want to die painful deaths. With that said, he hands Noel a down payment for the two slaves and begins taking them away. Tanya pleads with Noel not to do this, but again, forgiveness doesn't exist in his dictionary, so she turns to Walter and asks him to do something about it. She knows Walter has a crush on her, so she expects him to save her, but Walter refuses, so she starts laying into him with every insult she can come up with, and the look on Walter's face is priceless because he never could have imagined she would say such things to him. Now that the deal is done, Noel gives the man his 1 million payment and turns to leave with Walter. After this incident, Walter was left questioning his life choices and he is seriously considering quitting the whole seeker job, but Noel tells him this wasn't his fault. In this profession, you're going to meet a lot of people, and many of them will be backstabbers. Walter may not be mentally tough and may be slightly dumb, but Noel believes he's a gifted warrior, so he wants to continue to fight by his side and rebuild their party together. However, Walter can't bring himself to accept and refuses to live the life of a seeker after what just happened. Noel understood and accepted Walter's wishes, so as Walter was leaving the city, Noel wished him good luck with his future endeavors and bid him farewell. But as for him, he hasn't given up on his dream yet. He is disappointed that his party ended up being dissolved, but he refuses to let this stop him from becoming the strongest, so he intends to rebuild the Blue Beyond party and make it stronger than ever before. Noel puts out a post looking for new party members, but while he's waiting for people to show up, Wolf keeps pestering him. He tells Noel that no one is going to show up because all the people who are skilled enough to meet Noel's requirements would already be in a party, and he's not wrong, but Noel tells him to mind his own business. Wolf keeps talking though and tells Noel that he would love to have him join Lightning Bite. Noel thinks about it for a second, and Lightning Bite certainly is a good choice for a party with all its skilled members, with Wolf the swordsman and Lisha the archer, as well as other strong members. Overall, it's not a terrible proposition, and Wolf reminds Noel that he would be able to make a lot of money if he joined his party, but Lisha and the others in Lightning Bite tell him that he shouldn't be so pushy about things like this. Surprisingly, Noel tells Wolf that he will agree to join Lightning Bite, but only under the condition that he becomes the new leader of the party. The other party members don't seem to mind if Noel becomes their new leader, and Wolf can't believe they all agreed to it so easily. But it seems like an easy choice to them since Noel is definitely a lot smarter than Wolf. Wolf admits Noel may be smarter than him, but he is still the one who founded Lightning Bite, so he isn't going to give it up to Noel anytime soon. Just then, a girl appears behind everyone, and they are all startled because none of them could sense her coming, not even Lisha, and she's got elf ears. The mysterious girl introduces herself as Alma and says she's here to apply to join Noel's party, so Noel sits down with her and begins the interview. First things first, he asks her if she's a minor because he doesn't want to get in any legal trouble with the Empire, but luckily Alma is 21 years old, so she's old enough to become a seeker. After that, the members of Lightning Bite begin asking all sorts of personal questions, like her hobbies and favorite books, but what Noel really wants to know is her job and rank. Alma answers and says she's a C-rank scout, and Noel thinks this is a stroke of luck because he has been looking for a good scout for a while now. But before he accepts her, he has one more question and asks why she wants to become a seeker. Alma informs him that she isn't actually interested in becoming a seeker. She's just here because she wanted to see Noel, the grandson of Overdieth. Noel is surprised that Alma knows about his grandpa, but she clarifies that she has never personally met Overdieth. But her grandpa once fought Noel's grandpa several years ago, and it cost him his red arm. Noel was put on edge because he thinks Alma is here to get revenge for her grandpa, but Alma denies it because she isn't into generational grudges. She just wanted to find out what the grandson of a legendary hero like Overdieth would be like. Her grandpa is dead anyway, so it's not like it matters if she gets revenge or not. Noel is curious, so he asks who her grandpa was, and Alma answers that his name was Alcor Udicar. The entire bar goes silent at the mention of that name because Alcor is famous for being the head of the Society of Assassins. He would kill any target at a client's request as long as he was sufficiently compensated, so he was known as the strongest assassin. One of the bar regulars gets offended that Alma would claim to be related to a man as legendary as Alcor, and he doesn't believe a word of what she said, so he calls her out. Wolf tells Logan to back down, but he's already fired up, so he tells Alma that there's an unspoken rule among Seekers, so you have to go to the right bar for your rank, otherwise you'll get beaten up by the bar regulars. Alma has never heard of such a rule, probably because Logan is the only one who follows it since he loves getting the chance to beat people up, but she interrupts Logan's rant and says she has a question to ask Noel. She wants to know what determines a Seeker's rank, so Noel tells her your rank is usually determined by the kind of jobs you take or by the skill you display. Alma understands now, so if she wants to prove that she is strong enough to be here, all she has to do is take Logan down. Logan is enraged that she thinks she can beat him, so he tries to punch her, but she vanishes right before his eyes, and in a matter of seconds, Logan gets knocked the F out. After what he just saw, Noel jumps up and hires Alma immediately, but Alma is now hungry from all the energy she wasted beating Logan up, so Noel takes her out and buys her a snack. Alma is astounded by how tasty the bun is, and Noel finds this strange since she shouldn't be so excited over regular buns, but she never got to eat anything as good as this while living up in the mountains. Hearing that she has spent all of her life in the mountains, Noel finds it a little easier to believe that she is really the granddaughter of Alcor. Alma is a little upset that Noel didn't believe her till now, but she still believed him when he said he was Overdick's grandson. Her grandpa had warned her never to fight over death under any circumstances, because the man wouldn't hesitate to cheat in any manner necessary to win, and when she looks at Noel, his eyes made her feel like he would do the same thing. Noel asks if she spent her time in the mountains training to become an assassin, and Alma confirms it. She has to rank up from a scout to an assassin, and while she hasn't ranked up yet, she meets the requirements to be classified as a B-rank scout. If that's the case, Noel asks why she hasn't already joined the Assassin Society since she is more than qualified, and Alma had intended to do just that, but when she was taking the entrance exam, there was a bit of an incident. She was asked to fight one of their assassins, but she was disappointed because her opponent wasn't as strong as she was hoping he would be. The guy was offended that she called him weak, so as the match started, he went at her with full force. But after all his big talk, he missed every single punch he threw and ended up on the ground. Alma then held a knife to his head, so the guy began pleading for his life since this was just an exam and killing isn't allowed. Those may be the rules, but Alma simply doesn't care because her grandpa taught her that only the strong can survive, so all weaklings must die. Just before she stabs the guy, her blade gets caught and she's forced to back away because Simon, the new head of the Assassin Society, refused to let her just kill one of his people. After that, Alma was rejected from the Assassin Society for obvious reasons. The society approved of her skills, but they just couldn't allow her to join because of her murderous tendencies as they don't want to deal with her. Apparently, the Assassin Society is in the process of officially being recognized as an organization by the royal family, so they will be focusing mainly on spy work instead of assassinations, and they need to keep a clean record to do that. It takes a second for Noel to realize that Alma just shared a national secret with him, so he is worried the society might send assassins to shut him up because of it. However, Noel thinks it's fine since she can probably protect him if it comes to that, although that doesn't make him feel any better. There's nothing he can do about it now, so the next day, Noel and Alma head out into the forest to do some teamwork training. Noel asks Alma if she knows anything about talkers like him, but she hasn't really studied the topic, so all she knows is that they have weak combat skills, but possess strong support skills instead. Noel tells her she's correct, but a talker's capabilities are a lot more complicated than that. For instance, Noel can use the assault command to make his teammates strong enough to end a fight in one shot, but if he uses it at the wrong time, it could result in his entire party getting wiped out. That's why he needs to be aware of all the things that go on during the battle and use his skills accordingly to bring about the best outcome. However, there's a drawback since as a talker, he can't use buffs on himself, so he isn't meant to be able to fight. Of course, that hasn't stopped him so far. To begin her training, Noel tells Alma that he wants her to capture a monster in these woods, and although it's not as dangerous as the ones in the Abyss, it is still a big enough threat that it needs to be eliminated. He tells her he is talking about the killer rabbits, and Alma thinks they are really cute, but Noel reminds her that these things are still dangerous. He wants her to catch a killer rabbit with one of his buffs active on her, and Alma thinks this should be easy, but she says she doesn't need Noel's help to do it. It may be true that Alma is perfectly capable of doing this on her own, but that's not why he wants her to use one of his buffs. She may think a buff will only make her stronger, but it takes a lot of training to be able to use it effectively. For example, Alma has a skill called Excel that doubles her speed, and it's stacked so she can use it consecutively up to 5 times. However, she couldn't use it at full power from the start because the increased speed would have broken her bones and torn her muscles. And that's just with her own skill, so imagine what would happen if she had a buff from Noel on top of that. She needs to train her body to be able to adapt to the strain of Noel's buff, so they are out here to test how well she can handle it. Noel's former party were talented, and even they took 6 months before they could effectively utilize his buffs, so Alma's performance will determine whether they continue as a team or not. Alma ensures him that she can handle whatever he has planned, so Noel asks her if she can sense any killer rabbits nearby, and there are rabbits in the area right now, so Noel activates his tactician skill and tells her to use her Axel skill at max capacity. As long as she follows his orders, her ability will have a stronger effect, and to pass his test, all she needs to do is capture one of the bunnies and bring it back to him within 10 seconds. Alma activates her acceleration skill, and in the blink of an eye, she's already halfway across the forest catching rabbits. She is amazed by how much faster she is than normal, so before the 10 seconds are up, she returns to Noel with all 13 rabbits. Noel is surprised she managed to catch them all, and not only was she able to utilize the buffs easily, but she did it all in the span of 8 seconds too. From what he has seen, Noel is sure she doesn't need any further training, so he suggests that they take their first job as a party, and he's already got the perfect one in mind. He received a letter from a former client a while ago, and it says there have been a bunch of thieves attacking the village of Mintz, so Noel and Alma are going to go take care of it. They will be traveling by stagecoach, and Alma thinks it's really fun because she has never ridden one before, but it's going to be a long and boring ride. So Noel says he will tell her about the work a Seeker can take on. Seekers aren't limited to quests in the Abyss, they are also able to hunt monsters, criminals, treasure, and even mystic land. The gang of thieves they are on their way to deal with wouldn't usually be a problem for the local lord to handle, but with all the bureaucracy, the village would have been destroyed by the time any official help arrives. That's why he was hired to help, although since the village is pretty poor, Noel isn't expecting to receive much of a reward, but it'll be a good chance to see how Alma does in actual combat. After a long coach ride, they arrive in the town of Eudora, and Alma's butt is stiff as a board from all the sitting, so she never wants to have to sit in one of those again. For now, Noel suggests they find an inn to stay at for the night, but everywhere they go, all the rooms are booked, so they eventually get stuck sharing a single room because it's all that's available. Noel tells Alma that you will sleep on the floor so she can have the bed if she wants, but Alma doesn't see why they can't just share the bed together, and she finds it really cute that Noel gets embarrassed about things like this. Noel doesn't want to talk about this anymore, so he walks away to go take a bath. To pass the time, Alma began doing some stretches, but as soon as Noel exits the bath, she stands straight up and begins admiring his perfectly formed muscles. She thinks he has an amazing physique, but it's a shame that he's just a talker because if he was a warrior like Overdieth, he could have become the ultimate seeker. No matter how much hard work he puts in, he will never be able to outclass those with natural talent, and Alma is disappointed because she would have loved to see what heights he could reach. Noel doesn't let her comments get to him and flicks her on the forehead for saying unnecessary things, but while Alma is taking her bath, he begins reflecting on the things she said because he knows she is right. He wanted to be a warrior like his grandpa more than anything, but life didn't give him what he wanted, so he has to deal with the class he got. Once they finally arrive in the village, the chief comes out to greet the party, but he is a little surprised to see that there are only 2 of them. Noel explains that his other party members had to quit the party for various reasons, leaving out the part about him selling them off. Anyway, the Blue Beyond party now consists of Noel and Alma alone. Noel assures the chief that the 2 of them are more than capable of handling some thieves. They'd all sit down to have a meeting in the chief's living room, and Noel notices the chief's daughter staring at him from behind a curtain, so he says hi to her, but the girl immediately hides from him. The chief apologizes to Noel for his daughter's rude behavior and explains that she was actually really looking forward to seeing him, but Noel just wants to talk about the details of the mission chief has for him. According to the letter Noel received, there is a band of around 20 thieves in the area, and they've already attacked one of the neighboring villages, so this village might be their next target. He asks if there are any clues as to the location of the thieves' base, and the chief has actually managed to scout it out. The thieves are in the rocky clearing in the eastern part of the forest, and with the info provided, Noel shouldn't have any trouble locating them, but before he goes, he wants to discuss compensation. The chief's letter offered 200,000 up front and 300,000 once he completes the job, but before Noel is even done speaking, the chief's wife brings out the upfront 200,000, and the chief promises to pay the rest upon completion of the quest. Noel is pretty surprised since he was fully expecting them to start bargaining on the price, and from the coins in the bag, it looks like the chief just barely managed to scrape this money together, so he must be really desperate. Since he's got the upfront payment, Noel and Alma head out to complete the mission, but as they are walking there, Alma tells Noel that the chief was staring at her cleavage the entire time they were talking, and he was doing it right in front of his wife and daughter too, so she thinks very little of him. Just then, the village chief's daughter comes running up behind them, and she wants to talk to Noel since she was too nervous to do it back at the house. She shows him her toy, and Noel recognizes it as the one he gave her the last time he was in this village. The girl has had it ever since and has treasured it more than anything because she really likes Noel. She doesn't have much else to say, but she promises to cook something delicious for him once he gets back from the mission, and Noel says he is looking forward to it. Alma found the whole interaction to be really funny, since Noel actually seems to have a sweet side, but he doesn't want to hear it from her. Later that night, they finally make it to Thieves' Camp, and Noel has no idea why the chief thought there were only 20, because the number of thieves here is well over 40. He quickly identifies the leader of the group, and the guy looks awfully familiar, so Noel soon realizes that it's none other than Gordo the Razor Blade. The dude has a 2 million Phil bounty on his head, but he's a B-rank scout, so he asks Alma if she's confident she would be able to beat him. Alma is sure she could win if it was a proper one-on-one, but not so much if she has to deal with all of Gordo's henchmen at the same time. Noel expected that answer, so he says he has a plan to handle all the henchmen. Alma is surprised Noel intends on fighting with her because if he gets any closer than he already is, the bandits will be able to detect him, although Alma can get as close as she wants because she has a stealth skill. Noel tells her to stop talking and to just focus on following his instructions, so she does as she is told and jumps into the camp with her stealth skill active. Noel and Alma are able to maintain communication because one of Noel's skills, Link, which allows him to share his thoughts with his teammates. Before long, Alma makes it to Gordo's tent and informs Noel that she's within striking distance, so Noel uses Stun Howl on the entire camp, causing all the henchmen to freeze up temporarily. The second everyone is stunned, Noel orders Alma to kill Gordo, so with her quintuple acceleration, she charges into the tent and immediately stabs him through the heart. Now that Gordo is dead, all that's left is to take care of the remaining bandits, so Noel orders Alma to keep them busy until he can get down there, and she begins slaughtering the soldiers in her immediate vicinity. As Noel descends the hill, he notices that Alma seems to be enjoying this a little too much, and her murderous tendencies might become a problem for him someday, but that day is not today, so he joins her in combat and uses his fire bullet to burn the rest of the thieves to a crisp. Once the mission is complete, the two of them head back to the village and are greeted by the village chief, who says he is glad they are alive. He asks about the situation with the thieves, and Noel informs him that they have all been dealt with, offering their leader's head as proof, but the village chief says he doesn't need to see the severed head. Since he has completed the mission, Noel asks for the rest of his payment, and the chief says he will give it to him, but first he invites him to have dinner with them since his daughter, Chelsea, has been looking forward to it. As Noel and Alma sit down with the family, the chief tells Noel about how Chelsea was recently evaluated as a swordsman, so Chelsea asks Noel if she thinks she can become a seeker like him. Noel tells her that anyone can become a seeker, although there is usually a training camp where you have to go to learn the ropes, but alternatively, Chelsea could work as a supporter for an established seeker and gain experience that way. But, as he is saying this, the chief and his wife have a look on their face that says they are up to no good. A little while later, Chelsea asks Noel if he will allow her to join his party if she becomes a powerful seeker in the future, and Noel says if she becomes powerful in the future and still looks up to him, he will be more than happy to accept her into his party, and Chelsea is really excited to hear that. Just then, the chief and his wife come back to the living room with a bottle of wine, and he says he wants to celebrate, so he pours a glass of his very expensive bottle of wine for both Noel and Alma. However, after inspecting the wine a little, Noel says he couldn't possibly take the first sip of such high-quality wine, so he insists that the chief take the first sip. The chief starts panicking and tries to make up an excuse for why he can't drink it, but Noel still insists that he sip the wine first because he knows that the chief poisoned it. The chief tries to deny poisoning the wine, but Noel has a lot of reasons for his accusation. First, the chief clearly lied about there being only 20 thieves, so he wouldn't have to pay as much, and someone who would do that would never open such an expensive bottle of wine for guests. Secondly, the wine isn't even expensive. Noel can tell by the smell that it's the cheapest wine possible, and that it was opened a long time ago, and finally there has been a distinct bloodlust coming from the chief and his wife ever since they brought out that bottle of wine. Alma calls the man stupid for thinking they would fall for such an obvious murder attempt, plus the poison wouldn't have worked anyway since Alma is immune to all sorts of poisons. The chief gets angry and claims that they have no evidence, But if he is still denying that he poisoned the wine, then Noel says he should have no issues drinking it. The village chief throws a tantrum and yells for Noel to get out of his village immediately, but Noel just uses his confession skill on him and forces the chief to admit that he intended to poison them so he wouldn't have to pay Noel and then steal all their money and equipment. Chelsea can't believe her father was really trying to kill Noel, but now that Noel has heard the confession, he immediately jumps up and stabs the chief in the eye with his thumb. The chief yells out in pain, but Noel is nowhere near done because he's going to take out the chief's other eye, and after that his nose and then his tongue. The chief begs for forgiveness, but forgiveness is the last thing Noel would ever hand out, especially not to someone who tried to kill him. He tells the chief that if he wants to survive, then he's going to have to give Noel every last penny he has. The chief pleads with Noel not to take his money because he has debts to repay and the Gambino Mafia family will do terrible things to him if he misses a payment, and that's sad and all, but does Noel look like he gives a frick? He's about to go through with it, but at the last second, Chelsea brings out the bag with all the money they have in the house, which is around $800,000, and she tells Noel he can have it, so he should please let her father go. The chief yells at her because if they lose that money, the Gambino family might kill them. But if Chelsea doesn't give that money to Noel, then Noel will definitely kill the chief right now. Noel accepts the money, and after making sure there's enough, he tells Alma that they are leaving. But as he leaves, Chelsea curses Noel and all other seekers for what he has done, which stings a little since she looked up to him a few minutes ago, but it is what it is. As Noel and Alma are walking away, Alma asks Noel if he's okay with how things ended up, but he's got his money, and the chief was the one in the wrong, so he can live with being hated for his ruthlessness. A little while later, they see an airship pass overhead, and from the insignia on the bottom, Noel recognizes they had belonged to the Goat Clan, the 3-star regalia. Alma thinks it's cool, but she doesn't really know what regalia means, so Noel explains that it means the clan has been recognized by the Empire. There are currently 7 regalia stars, and not all of them are equal because there are various levels of strength between them. The last 4 are at the bottom, the 3rd and 2nd are relatively equal, but only the most powerful clan earns the 1-star regalia title. One of the benefits of being recognized as a regalia is that it comes with the rights to your own personal airship, and the seekers who manage to earn this title are top of the line in strength, intelligence, wealth, and experience. Noel has already made the decision that by this time next year, he will become strong enough to be recognized as a regalia. Seeing the determination in Noel's eyes, Alma thinks back to the day she was rejected by the Assassin Society. She asked Simon if she did well enough, and Simon told her that her combat prowess was indeed extraordinary, but that didn't mean she passed. He says he has a simple question for her, so he asks if Alma was the one who killed Alucor, the former Assassin Association leader, and she answers that she did it. Even though he was the god of assassins, he became a sitting duck in his insanity. Alcor was a truly terrifying man, yet he still could never defeat Overdeath, and that fact ate away at his mind until it drove him crazy. Alma is actually the daughter of Alcor and a random woman he kidnapped, and she wasn't the only one either. Alcor had many children, but he never wanted to raise a child. He wanted to raise an assassin that could become his successor. So he forced all his children to fight amongst themselves to the death until Alma was the only one left alive. Simone understands the situation that led Alma to become this way, but she simply isn't a good fit for the Assassin Society. Alma couldn't believe she was being rejected even though she passed the test, but Simone told her that physical strength wasn't the only criterion. That was 21 years of her life that were wasted, so what is she supposed to do now? Simone tells her she is free to live her life however she wants, but if she is looking for something to do, he informs her that the grandson of Overdeath is a seeker as well, and even though he is just a talker, he is still considerably strong. If she is intrigued, then she should head to Eltria if wants to meet him. That was exactly what Alma did, and right now she is really glad she did because she has found a new purpose in life and swears to fight by Noel's side forever. In a high-security prison, one of the guards has just been knocked out in the bathroom, and the assailant transforms into a perfect copy of the guard to take his place. He goes to the guard's post, and the guard's partner is none the wiser to the switch. The impersonator plays the part and asks which prisoner they are guarding, and his partner begins talking about the heinous murders the guy in there, the puppeteer, committed, and the puppeteer is exactly who the impersonator was looking for. Every morning, Noel wakes up and begins his training routine of 2 laps around the castle walls with a ton of rocks on his back. He gives himself a 2-hour time limit, and he never skips it, no matter what. This training was drilled into him by his grandfather the same day Noel decided that he wanted to become a seeker, and there was no easy way to accomplish it. Talkers like Noel aren't able to buff themselves, so his only option was to get buffed naturally, which is why he trains relentlessly every day. After he's done with his morning routine, Noel takes a shower and thinks about what Alma told him a couple of days ago. No matter how hard he trains his body, he will never be able to achieve the level of power that comes with being born with talent. Just then, there's a knock at the door, and it turns out to be Alma. So Noel lets her in, and she's impressed with how nice his room is. They had planned to meet today, but Alma wasn't supposed to arrive for another couple of hours, which is why Noel isn't ready yet. Alma taunts him, saying she'd be happy that she showed up earlier, but after seeing Noel's peak physique, she says she's gonna touch him. Before Noel has a chance to react, Alma pushes him onto the bed, and even though she sees herself as his big sister, it's not stopping her from trying to kiss Noel. Noel tries to get her off of him, but Alma has natural scout strength, so he resorts to his only option to get out of this without his lips being tainted and headbutts Alma. A little while later, Alma realizes she may have gone too far, but she still doesn't think Noel should have headbutted her. However, she did assault him, so Noel believes it was perfectly justified. Alma still hasn't given up on getting affection from Noel though, so she grabs his arm and declares that this is now a date. Noel is sick of her antics, so he just plays along and says the first place they are going is the Appraisal Guild. Appraiser is a unique class possessed by a subset of gnomes, and it's literally all they do. Noel and Alma arrive in the appraisal hall, and before their turn comes up, Noel asks Alma what she's going to do. She already meets the qualifications for a rank up, as evidenced by the mark on her chest. The mark automatically shows up on your body once you meet the requirements, so Noel wants to know if she's still going to become an assassin. Alma hasn't really decided on it yet, so she asks Noel what he thinks she should do, but he isn't sure either. An assassin build would definitely help with combat, but he doesn't want to commit to anything right away in order to avoid skill redundancy with future recruits. Alma didn't know Noel still intended to recruit more people into their team, and she's kind of jealous, but Noel explains that it would be far too reckless for them to go into an abyss with only 2 party members. So he just wants to get Alma appraised so he can see what her options are and plan accordingly. After they are done with the appraisal, Noel and Alma head back out, and this time, Noel says they are going to a blacksmith shop that's run by a dwarf. Good equipment draws out the full potential of the Seeker, so they must get their gear maintained regularly. Noel greets the blacksmith, and he seems to have a good relationship with him, so the blacksmith greets him back. The blacksmith notices Alma and assumes she must be a new member of Noel's party, so he starts assessing her to see what equipment she could use, but then he gets distracted by Alma's melons. After that, Noel takes Alma to a skill book shop so she can pick up some useful skills guides. He talks to the owner and tells her to help Alma pick out some appropriate skills while he's gone. Alma asks where Noel is going, so he explains that this store only carries skill books made for scouts, so he needs to go to another store to get Talker skill books for himself. Before he leaves, he turns back and reminds Alma that she only has a budget of 1 million for her skill books, and under no circumstances should she waste that money. Alma agrees to Noel's terms, but the second she's left alone, she buys herself a giant teddy bear. Noel is angry at her for wasting money and at himself for trusting her, but Alma says she didn't waste all the money. She actually got a really good skill book called Armor Piercing, and with it, she's able to cut her opponent's defenses in half. The book cost her 800,000, and she used the leftover money to get the bear as a substitute since Noel won't let her hug him anymore. Overall, she thinks it was a successful shopping trip, but then she notices that Noel didn't buy anything for himself. She asks why, so he explains that the skill book he wanted to buy was too far out of budget for him to consider getting. The book was one for exorcism, and a skill like that would allow him to instantly wipe out undead monsters, but the skill book costs 30 million and he can't afford that. Just then, he notices someone walk by, so he gets up and tells Alma to go ahead and start eating without him. He follows the guy into a back alley, and once there's no one else around, the man reveals himself to Noel. This is Loki, and he is the shapeshifter from earlier who infiltrated the prison. Noel commissioned him to do an investigation regarding the puppeteer that's locked up in there, and Loki did not disappoint. He hands over the info he gathered, and while it's none of his business what Noel does, he asks if Noel is sure about recruiting the puppeteer into his team. After all, the man once shook the entire capital with his power, but that's precisely why Noel wants to recruit him. Besides, he is fairly certain that the puppeteer was framed for the crimes, which is why he hired Loki to investigate so he can prove the puppeteer's innocence. Loki understands Noel's plan, but it's weird hearing the guy who sold his former teammates off as slaves talk about rescuing a death row inmate. If nothing else, Noel has to be a little crazy to go from one to the other so quickly, and he takes pride in that. After checking Loki's report, Noel commends him for a job well done, but things like this are a natural talent for Loki, since his imitator class allows him to take on the form of any person, so there's no place safe from his infiltration. Noel pays him for the work he has done, asks Loki to keep investigating, but before he leaves, Loki tells Noel he has some bonus intel for him. He lets Noel know that there has been a nasty drug being sold in these parts, and it's said to be better than anything else on the market, but it causes immense fits of rage, so violent crime in the area has increased. Noel wonders who would be crazy enough to sell something like that, since the Luciano's family would surely put a stop to it once they find out. However, the group selling the drug is actually a subdivision of the Luciano's family, so it's not likely that anything will be done about the drug. The ones in charge of this territory are the Gambinos, and their leader, Albert Gambino, is a real nut job. Back on Alma's end, she's upset that Noel left her alone for so long, so she's trying to cheer herself up with food, but just then, an old friend of hers happens to walk by. Meanwhile, Noel is walking through the Gambino territory, and he is quite disappointed with the current state of the place. The former leader of the Gambino family was a good man, so much so that even Finocchio respected him, but when the former leader died, his son, Albert, took over, and this place went to shit under his rule. As Noel is walking, he notices a man sitting by the side of the road, and the man looks a lot different from the people of this kingdom, so Noel assumes he must be an immigrant. However, with his current state, he's probably going to die as a beggar before long. Noel feels bad for him, so as he passes by, he drops a coin for the man. But as he does this, the man gets up and hands him back his coin, thinking Noel must have accidentally dropped it, and he tells Noel that this place isn't safe for a cute girl like him. Noel is offended that the man thinks he's a girl, so he turns to him and makes it clear that he's a guy. And as for the coin, he would never take it back after a filthy beggar like him touched it. He begins walking away, but now the man feels offended, so he tries grabbing Noel's shoulder. However, Noel kicks him square in the stomach and sends him flying backwards. He tells the man that he shouldn't try to touch him with his worthless hands, but the way Noel is looking down on him now reminds the man of someone else he used to know, and he refuses to let that slide. He usually doesn't like fighting over things like this, but he's not so weak that he can't stand up for himself. As the man takes his battle stance, Noel realizes that this guy looks like he is really skilled with a sword, and as he charges at Noel, his sword strike has Noel fearing for his life. Noel manages to dodge, but the man continues to attack him relentlessly until Noel finally grabs the guy's arm and sends him flying into a random building. After he gets back up, the man admits that Noel is pretty capable as a fighter, so he asks him if he's a ninja class. The ninja class is one that's exclusive to an island in the Far East, so Noel assumes that must be this guy's homeland. He tells the guy that he's just a talker, and the guy is amazed that a talker would be able to fight so well, but it's not like it matters much because the guy will be using his skills from now on. Once Noel sees the guy's aura, he gets a huge smile on his face because this guy is definitely strong, and if he meets Noel's expectations, then Noel will definitely recruit him into his party. However, just before they can start fighting seriously, a munchkin comes out of nowhere and yells at Koga for getting into a fight without his permission. While that's going on, Alma and her friends sit down to chat, and Alma's friend is surprised that Alma hasn't ranked up yet. Alma tells her she has two main options for her rank up. She can either become an assassin or a chaser, but Noel told her to hold off on making a decision yet. Alma's friend can see why Noel would ask Alma to wait, since chasers and assassins have two totally different roles, so Alma's choice would have to depend on the other team members. In fact, she assumes Noel is probably out recruiting a new member for the party as they speak, and over on Noel's end, the prospective recruit is still being yelled at by the Munchkin. The Munchkin had told Koga to sit tight and wait for him to return, and he doesn't want to hear any of Koga's excuses, so he uses his ring to shock Koga until he falls unconscious. Noel recognizes that as an oath of subordination ring, an item that compels someone to obey the wearer of the ring, and normally something like this would be prohibited by law, but it is permitted if it is used between a master and his slave. After Koga is out cold, the Munchkin turns to Noel and asks why he was fighting with Koga, but he also mistakes Noel for a girl, and he's starting to get weird, so Noel kicks him across the street. The Munchkin asks why Noel did that, but Noel holds him at gunpoint and says he's the one asking the questions here. First, he asks where the Munchkin is from, since he doesn't seem like he comes from this town. So the man explains that he is from a place far south called Soldaland, and next, Noel asks him why he came to Eltria. The man hesitates to answer at first, but the gun motivates him to reveal that he is on the run. He used to work for the Delembert family and ran their underground fighting ring, but then he got caught embezzling their funds and they weren't very happy with him, so he had to flee. He came to Eltria because it is the territory of the Lucianos, and the Delembert family won't be able to get him here. Koga is one of his slave fighters, so he brought him here when he fled, and Noel assumes the man wants to use him to enter the Eltria underground fighting scene. The man admits that that's his plan, and he asks if Noel is involved with the underground fighting ring by chance, since he needs someone to vouch for him. But Noel informs him that he is just a seeker, and in case the guy hasn't figured it out by now, he's also a guy. The man is shocked that Noel is a seeker, but also even more shocked that someone with such a pretty face is a guy. Noel gets pissed off by the guy's reaction, but that aside, the guy is running from the D'Alembert family, so Noel wouldn't be getting in trouble with them if he shot him. Plus, if the Munchkin is dead, Noel can claim Koga for himself. And when the benefits are so good, the choice is clear to Noel, so he executes the man. Just kidding, Noel may be heartless, but he's not a murderer. He gave him a warning shot and spared his life, but if he doesn't get out of here in the next 10 seconds, Noel isn't going to miss a second time. He gets up terrified and kicks Koga so they can start running away. And while Noel would have loved to have Koga's strength, the fact that Koga hasn't killed that Munchkin to regain his freedom means he is weak-willed, and Noel doesn't want someone like that on his team. A little while later, Noel returns to the cafe and Licia greets him, but Noel doesn't recall inviting her here, so he says he's not paying for her food. Alma gets mad at him and says Licia was only here to keep her company since Noel left her alone for so long, so Noel relents and agrees to treat both of them just this once. Noel then takes his seat and Licia asks him if he managed to find any good party members. She figured he must have been busy recruiting since it took him so long to get back, but while it would have been nice if he recruited someone, he didn't find anyone who met his requirements. Right now, there's something else he wants to look into, so he asks Licia if she knows anything about the drug that's in circulation right now. She has heard about it before, but she doesn't know much about it. So Noel tells her that it apparently has a powerful side effect of rage, and it is currently going unchecked. So he wants her to be careful if she comes across it. Licia is thankful for the advice, but Noel never goes out of his way to show concern for others, so she's a bit shocked he would warn her. Noel says he's just sharing info since he's on good terms with Licia's party, so Licia thanks him again and gets up since it's about time she returned to the rest of her party. Before she leaves, she invites Alma to join her at a great sweet shop she knows, but not just as a fellow seeker, as a friend. Alma likes the sound of that, but Noel has no intention of becoming best friends forever with Licia, so he tells her to hurry up and leave already. Once Licia is gone, Noel starts thinking about the situation with that uncontrolled drug because if even Licia has heard rumors about it, then it must have spread outside the capital, so Noel hopes it won't become a bigger issue than it already is. Meanwhile, the Munchkin Miguel has just been captured by Albert Gambino, and while normally Albert would want nothing to do with him, the D'Alembert family wants their revenge for Miguel's treachery, and they ask the Gambino family for help. Miguel is in utter panic because not only has he been caught, but he was caught by Albert, who's a genuine psychopath. He's literally got a display case for the skulls of people he doesn't like. Albert says it would be no fun to just hand Miguel over to the D'Alembert family, and Miguel starts agreeing with him in an attempt to save himself and says someone as great as Albert shouldn't have to do something as boring as calling in a bounty for the D'Alembert family. But his ass-kissing backfires because Albert says he's going to do something that will be a lot of fun. And his idea of fun is skinning Miguel alive and turning him into a doll. Miguel freaks out and asks Albert if he's joking, but Albert is dead serious about it, and he even intends to skin Koga as well. Koga hears Albert say he's going to skin them alive, but he doesn't really care since he gave up on himself a long time ago. So now he just wants his miserable life to end, even if it's by being skinned alive. However, before Albert could bust out the skinning equipment, one of his debt collectors comes in and tells him he has brought someone who failed to make his payment on time, and it turns out to be the chief of the Mintz village. The chief goes on a long-winded rant explaining how he had gathered the money to pay Albert, but an evil seeker named Noel stole all the money completely unprovoked. He also says that Noel specifically called Albert Gambino a bitch, and Albert is outraged by that, so he vows that he will make Noel pay for the disrespect he has shown him. As a reward for being so honest, Albert decides to give the chief some more time to repay the loan, but that doesn't mean there won't be penalties for missing the agreed payment deadline. Albert thinks for a second and decides that he will be taking the chief's right arm as compensation for the late payment, and the chief is frozen in fear once he hears this. Albert wastes no time and orders Koga to carry out the dismemberment for him. He can tell that Koga is a long swordsman, so it should be easy for him to do it, even if it's just with a stick. Koga hesitates to move at first, but Miguel begins yelling at him to do as Albert commands, so Koga gets up and is about to go through with it. However, just before he does, Albert tells him to wait a minute because there is something he wants to do first. Albert then grabs a purple drug crystal and chomps down on it to get himself high because violence is always better when he's high out of his mind. Now that he is tasting colors and seeing sound, he permits Koga to chop off the chief's hand. In denial, the chief says there's no way Koga can cut off his hand with a stick, but before he even finishes his sentence, Koga has made his move, and a second later, the chief's hand falls off. The chief screams out in agony, and Albert is absolutely loving it, so Miguel tries to use this to his favor and offers to transfer ownership of Koga to Albert in an attempt to get on his good side, and it looks like it works because Albert agrees to take Koga as his own. Now that Koga officially belongs to Albert, He is taken to a separate room so he can change out of his rags, and while he does so, you get to see his tragic backstory. His father was a wealthy businessman, and his mother was one of the most beautiful women of the land, so by all indications, they were a happy couple with a blessed life. But then one day, out of nowhere, Koga's father was attacked and knocked out, while his mother was dragged away and had horrible things done to her. By the time Koga's father regained consciousness, he rushed to try and defend his wife, but the damage had already been done. 9 months later, Koga was born, and while his mother did her best to take care of him, Koga's father had grown bitter and resentful of the child. So once she saw the look of disdain he held in his eyes towards her, she couldn't take it anymore and drove a sword through her neck that night. Years passed since then, and Koga's father had become a drunkard from the loss of his wife, but Koga still yearned for fatherly affection, so he tried his best to make himself useful to him. However, the mere sight of Koga would often send his father rage, and all the rest of the people in the estate simply wished he had died alongside his mother so they wouldn't have to look at his face. Koga grew up in a household where he was constantly ridiculed and no one wanted him, and they left a toll on his sense of self-worth. One morning, he woke up and found himself on a boat with no warning, but it didn't take long for him to realize that he must have been sold off as a slave by his family because they didn't want him around. That's where Koga first met Miguel, and the first thing Miguel did was take him down to an illegal fighting ring. And when Koga began dominating the competition, Miguel was really happy and began praising him for doing such a good job. This was the first time Koga had ever received any kind of praise in his life, so he was brought to tears, but he soon realized that Miguel didn't actually care about him. All he cared about was the money he was making off him. Back to the present, Koga is done suiting up, so he is officially sent out on his first mission under the command of Albert. Later that night, Noel heads over to an abandoned church building to meet with Loki, since Loki said he had some important information to give him. Noel has been good to him, so he gives him a warning and says the Gambino family is after Noel's head. He fills Noel in on what happened and explained that the chief of the Mince village lied to Albert Gambino about Noel disrespecting him, and Albert believed it, so he is sending an assassin after Noel. Noel thinks it's stupid for Albert to order a hit on Noel based off such evidence, but Albert is practically a madman, so a sane person could never understand how he operates. Noel wonders how a man like Albert even got into a position where he's the head of the Gambino family, and the answer is nepotism. The former leader of the Gambino family only had one son, so while Albert was already a major F-up, he inherited the position without having to work for it. Just then, Noel hears the sound of armor clanking against the ground, and that means someone is approaching, so Noel realizes that Loki must have sold him out to the Gambino family. Loki apologizes, but if he didn't agree to do this, the Gambino family would have killed him. So worst comes to worst, he figures he can just flee to another country after this, so the Gambino family doesn't continue harassing him. That sounds like a decent plan to Noel. There's one thing Loki's plan is failing to account for, and that's the fact that nothing is stopping Noel from shooting him right here and now. Although, Noel is disappointed that he now has to kill Loki, because he really liked having him around. But surprisingly, Loki doesn't try to run and is totally fine with Noel shooting him. Noel is confused, so he asks why Loki is giving his life up right now, so Loki explains that he now realizes that it wasn't just Noel he sold out, but also his pride as an informant, and he needs to atone for that. Noel sees that Loki is serious about letting himself get shot, so just this once, he decides to forgive him for what he has done. And he tells Loki that he won't have to leave the country to escape the Gambino family either because Noel is personally going to destroy it. Loki is stunned for a moment, but then he begins laughing hysterically because Noel forgiving him is completely out of character for him. However, Loki is grateful to have been given a second chance, so he vows to make it up to Noel later. But for now, he's not much use in a fight, so he leaves. Once Loki is gone, Noel turns to face his attacker and drinks a battle potion in preparation for the fight. A battle potion greatly increases the user's physical ability, but it only lasts 10 minutes and it takes a toll on Noel's body afterwards. Once the attacker steps into view, Noel is shocked to realize that it's Koga, and Koga is equally surprised that the target you was sent to assassinate is Noel Stalin. Noel congratulates Koga for becoming an assassin for the Gambino family since it's a huge step up from a dirty street fighter. Anyway, there aren't going to be any interruptions this time, so Noel suggests they should pick up where they left off last time and points his gun at Koga, but Koga is hesitant to draw his swords. In all honesty, he doesn't want to fight Noel because he still owes him for that silver coin, but that doesn't mean he can defy his master's orders, so he still has to fight. But in accordance with his pride as a warrior, he formally announces himself as Koga the Slicing Long Swordsman and challenges Noel to a duel. Noel thinks Koga is dumb for giving away his profession like that, but he also respects the pride Koga has, so he responds and announces himself as well. After that, the fight begins and Noel fires his gun at Koga. But Koga is too quick for that, so he dodges and appears in front of Noel. However, just before Noel could be slashed, he uses a wire to get himself to safety. Now that Koga isn't weak and starving, his speed and accuracy are far greater than they were when Noel fought him earlier, but Noel still has a plan to defeat him. He fires a flame bullet at Koga, and even though Koga dodges, he gets caught up in the flames, so Noel assumes Koga will take some significant damage from that. Yet Koga emerges unharmed because he cuts the air around him to create a barrier to protect himself from the flames. He then jumps up to confront Noel, and Noel is forced to engage in close combat, so he tries to go for Koga's nuts, but Koga jumps back and yells that nut shots are a cowardly move. It may be cowardly, but this is a life or death fight, so he doesn't care what cheap tricks he has to use, he's going to get the job done. He then reaches into his jacket and pulls out a flashbang to blind Koga, and while Koga's vision is disabled, he attempts to take advantage and land a death blow. But before he can do that, Koga uses his special move and launches several slashes at Noel. He then corners Noel on a ledge. Even though Noel attempts to use his stun howl to stop Koga, Koga simply cuts through it, sending Noel crashing down to his doom. After hitting the ground, Noel gets knocked out, and by the time he wakes up, he finds Koga standing over him with his sword pointed at Noel's head. Koga says he was impressed by Noel's performance and praises him for being such a tough opponent. But Noel isn't interested in any half-hearted praise and asks Koga why he hasn't finished him off yet. Koga doesn't really know what to say because even though his mission was to kill Noel, after having such a good fight against him, he can't bring himself to finish the job. Seeing Koga act so indecisively infuriates Noel, so he starts yelling at Koga and grabs the sword, telling him that he can't afford to pity someone who is an enemy. If Koga doesn't kill Noel, then there's no way Albert is going to let him live, and while that may be true, Koga is still hesitant, and he doesn't understand why Noel is trying so hard to get him to finish the job when it would mean his death, so he assumes Noel is truly concerned for the lives of others. But a moment later, Noel says Koga has officially missed his chance to kill him because Alma has just arrived, and she's not letting anyone besides her touch Noel's beautiful body. Before the fight started, Noel uses his link skill to send a message to Alma about his situation, and he's really glad she's here since the battle potion he drank has just worn off, and the side effects have left him immobilized. Alma doesn't really understand the details, but she does know that Koga attacked Noel, so she asks Noel if it's alright for her to kill him, and Noel tells her to do it. Alma immediately attacks Koga, so he uses his swords to block her strike, but he also pleads with her not to do this because he really doesn't want to have to kill a woman. Alma finds it hilarious that he would say that when she is the one who has the upper hand, but Koga points out that she launched a surprise attack and caught him off guard, yet she still couldn't land a killing blow on him. Alma takes this as a challenge and activates her acceleration skill to speed blitz Koga and prove that she is superior, but Koga counters by activating his sense enhancement skill, which allows him to react much faster and with greater precision when his eyes are closed. As the two continue to battle, Noel is once again reminded of the fact that as a talker, he will never be able to do things like Alma and Koga can, but it just reignites his motivation to overcome the strong and become the strongest. So far, Alma and Koga have fought each other to a standstill, and Alma admits that Koga is stronger than she gave him credit for, but she's going to make sure she finishes him off with her next poisonous attack. And since she's getting serious, Koga decides to embrace gender equality and prepares his insta-kill slash to one-shot Alma. However, before either of them could attack the other again, Noel fires a flare into the sky and tells Alma to retreat. Alma doesn't want to, but this is an order, not a request, so she begrudgingly agrees to back off. Noel tells Koga he has to leave as well since that flare he fired will draw the attention of the military police, and Albert will be really angry if the Imperial government finds out what he's trying to do here. As much as Koga doesn't want to walk away empty-handed, he has no choice but to listen to what Noel says, but before he leaves, Noel calls him back and says he has a message he wants Koga to pass on to Albert. The next day, Koga reports back to Albert about his failed attempt to kill Noel, but surprisingly, Albert seems really chill about it. He also hands Koga a box with Miguel's head inside it, but otherwise he's pretty chill today. He says he will forgive Koga for failing this time since he's in a good mood, but he had better not fail him a second time. Koga swears that he will get the job done no matter what it takes, and Albert is glad to hear that, so he dismisses Koga. But before Koga leaves, he remembers that Noel gave him a message for Albert. Quote, "Albert Gambino, I'm gonna take down your entire organization and send your ass to the gulag." Albert calmly asks if Koga is telling the truth or if he's lying like the Chief of Minsk did, but there isn't a hint of deceit in Koga's face, so Albert starts tweaking out and now he wants Noel to die even more. Koga and Albert's bodyguard, Leos, both leave Albert's office to let him cool down. and as they walk away, Leos tells Koga that he may have taken it a little too far with what he said, so Koga apologizes. Leos asks if he said that to Albert because he had Miguel killed, but Koga pretty much hated Miguel anyway, so he would have no reason to care that he died. But the real reason Koga felt compelled to deliver Noel's message is because he thinks Noel is an amazing person. Even though he's only a talker, he trained himself to the point where he could go toe-to-toe against someone like Koga, and Koga knows the training must have been excruciating for Noel. But even then, no amount of training will ever make him strong enough to defeat a combat class as a talker. Yet despite this fact, Noel has never once lost the look in his eyes that says he will become the strongest in the world no matter what. After hearing what Koga had to say, Leos tells him he's become infatuated with Noel. No homo though, he means Koga is infatuated in the sense that he respects Noel as a rival and wants to grow stronger alongside him. Now that Koga thinks about it, Leos so right, but he wonders how Leos has so much experience on this topic, so Leos explains that he too has experienced something similar, but that was a long time ago. The next day, Albert pulls up on Noel while he's at the Seeker's Tavern, and he's looking to make Noel pay for what he said. He's got A-rank Leos and a couple of B-rank Seekers outside, so he's really confident that he can take Noel out today, and plops down at Noel's table to confront him. He then grabs Noel's bottle of wine and starts chugging it as a display of superiority, but he absolutely hates how the wine tastes. Despite being outnumbered, Noel calmly roasts Albert and tells him it's bad manners to drink someone else's wine without invitation. Although, manners may be too difficult for Albert's pea-brain to understand. Albert gets up in Noel's face in anger, so Noel tells him to back off since his bad breath is ruining Noel's appetite. Albert feels insulted, so he threatens to cut Noel's tongue off, but just before he can actually do anything, one of the Seekers in the tavern walks up behind him and tells him to stop. He has no idea what kind of beef Albert has against Noel, but he wants to make it clear that no matter the reason, he is not allowed to attack any Seekers in this tavern. Albert is offended and asks the man if he knows who he is, and the Seeker is well aware of Albert's reputation. But as a Seeker, he and the other patrons of this bar refuse to let an outsider like Albert do what he wants. Albert doesn't like being told no, so he orders Leos and the rest of the bodyguards to kill Noel and all the Seekers in the tavern, but the bodyguards are hesitant to comply with the order. Leos points out that it would be easy for them to kill all the Seekers since everyone in here is only C-rank, but if they go through with it, they are going to have to explain themselves to Don Luciano, and it would be really difficult to justify it. They are already on thin ice as it is because of that drug problem, so another slip-up will pretty much spell doom for the Gambino family. However, if he still insists on going through with it, Leos will make sure the job gets done. Albert now isn't sure about what he should do, so Noel decides to roast him some more and calls him a cowardly piece of shit with no intelligence or ease. Albert's even angrier than before, but Noel tells him he had better be careful because all that anger will get his blood pumping, and that will spread the poison he drank from the wine even faster. After Noel mentioned that the wine was poisoned, Albert starts freaking out, and Noel goes on to explain that he poisoned it the second he saw Albert walk through the door. Albert can't believe Noel would do such a thing since there was no guarantee that Albert would drink it, but it is a pretty simple decision if you think about it. If Albert didn't drink the wine, then it would be no big deal, but since he did, victory is assured for Noel. Albert begins violently trying to throw out the poison, but Noel tells him it's too late for that since the poison has already made its way into Albert's bloodstream by now. Albert is now in full-on panic mode and rushes out of the bar to go to a doctor, but once Albert is gone, Leos compliments Noel for being so clever. He knows the wine wasn't actually poisoned and that Noel was just saying that to convince Albert to get out here. Leos takes one look at Noel and can immediately tell that Koga was right about the determination in his eyes, so as a favor, he offers Noel two choices. He can take this money and leave Atria, so he doesn't get attacked by Albert again. But if he chooses to stay, then Leos will have no choice but to kill him right now. Noel decides to take the first option and gets up to leave with Alma, but as they leave the city gates, Alma is really impressed with Noel since everything went according to his plan. He's glad everything has worked out so far, but things will only get harder from here on out. For now, Noel and Alma are going their separate ways for a week because there's something Noel wants to investigate, and Alma wants to go train in the woods so she'll be stronger than Koga next time they fight. They fist bump on it, and Noel swears that by the time he returns, he will destroy Albert Gambino. A week later, Noel is back from his little expedition, and the second he sets foot in town, Albert pulls up on him with his entire army of bodyguards. He believes he has Noel cornered, so he orders them to start off by breaking all of Noel's arms and legs to make sure he suffers for as much time as possible. But surprisingly, Leos and the others completely ignore his order, and Albert doesn't understand what's going on. Noel breaks out, but since an idiot like Albert will never figure things out on his own, Noel explains to him that he has lost all right to order Leos and the others around. A little earlier that day, Leos and the others were all sitting together at a bar, and all of them were devastated because Albert had ordered them to kill a little girl earlier today. She was holding onto this toy like it meant the world to her. They all feel insanely guilty about it, so they ask Leos why they keep following Albert's demented orders like this. They join this line of work because they respected the former boss, but Albert has a restraining order on respect, so they can't keep following him. In the middle of their conversation, Noel shows up and notices them holding the gift he gave the daughter of the Mints chief, and even if her father was a weasel, Noel's still kinda like the little girl, so knowing she was killed because of Albert hurts a little. Anyway, he came here to have a chat with Leos, and Leos asks if Noel knows what's going to happen now that he's back in town. Noel is aware, but he tells them he didn't come to fight. He just wanted to drop off a document that they might find interesting. The piece of paper is Albert's birth certificate, and Noel got it because he had Loki look into Albert's origins while he was gone for a week. From what Loki found, Albert is really the son of a different man, but the former leader of the Gambinos had an affair with Albert's mother before Albert was born, so as a favor to her, he accepted Albert as his heir, even though Albert is not related to the Gambino family at all. There was also one other thing Noel wanted to look into, so he asked Loki to do some research about the former Gambino boss's cause of death. The results of that investigation revealed that not only is Albert not actually the former boss's son, but he also poisoned the former boss and made his death look like an illness. Albert has no idea how Noel managed to figure that out, but he tells them they can't prove that he really did anything. However, on the contrary, Noel has all the proof he could ever need because Noel has a handy skill called Confess that can be used to get people to admit to their crimes, and a confession from him will be more than enough evidence. Once Albert has been forced to admit to his crimes, Leos goes up to him and tells him that he is no longer their boss. He is immoral, stupid, and heartless, so they can't justify serving a man like him, but at the same time, regardless of his actions, the former boss did name Albert as his successor, so Leos is going to give him one last chance to redeem himself. If he fights Noel and wins, he can continue being the leader of the Gambino family, but Leos knows Albert would get folded immediately if he fought Noel himself, so he allows him to pick someone to represent him in battle. Albert refuses to be subjected to a trial like this, but all of a sudden, Finocchio shows up and Noel invited her here to act as a witness to the duel, so Albert has no choice in the matter anymore. Finocchio has been looking for a way to get rid of Albert for a while now, so when Noel proposed this plan to him, he was more than happy to participate. Plus, if Noel wins this, Finocchio will pay him 50 million. Albert accuses Finocchio of orchestrating this whole thing, but Finocchio says he did no such thing and he's sick of listening to Albert's complaining, so he yells at him to quit messing around and pick someone to fight for him already. Otherwise, he will have to face much greater consequences at Finocchio's hands. Albert agrees to pick a proxy, and Finocchio tells him that if he wins, then he will be acknowledged as the boss of the Gambino family once more, and furthermore, he will even let the whole scene Albert caused at the secret tavern go, so he better make his choice quickly. Albert looks around for a second, and he ends up telling Koga to fight for him. Noel had predicted this would happen since even though Koga isn't the strongest person here, he is bound by an oath of subordination, so he wouldn't be able to betray Albert even if he wanted to. Alma wants to have a rematch to prove that she's better than Koga, but Noel pushes her aside and says he will handle it himself. Alma tries to convince him not to fight since she already knows he can't beat Koga, but Noel believes he has a good chance of winning, so he tells her to just sit tight and watch him work. Once Noel is face to face with Koga, he notices that Koga looks really eager to fight even though there's nothing in it for him if he wins, but Koga is just glad he gets to fight Noel again. And if Noel is so eager to fight personally, then he must have a trick up his sleeve, and Koga can't wait to see what it is. The two ray themselves and charge at each other, but Noel jumps into the air and fires an ice bullet. Even though Koga manages to counter it, it still creates a massive ice wall around them, so now no one can see what's going on inside. As the fight goes on, Noel is running around to avoid getting slashed by Koga, but when he finally creates some distance, Koga takes a stance that means he's about to use his EI Flash. That skill basically increases Koga's attack power 7-fold once he draws his sword, so if Noel gets too close, he might end up getting cut in half by it. But he still isn't worried because he has already planted the seeds to ensure his victory. To Koga's surprise, Noel throws his gun away and says it's out of ammo, so he's going to be using a dagger to finish this. But before that, he has something important to say. Can you do the thug shaker? Koga is caught off guard and asks Noel what that's supposed to mean, but Noel just said it so he could find an opening in Koga's defenses to attack. Right now, Koga is worried that Noel has a trump card up his sleeve, so he gets hesitant to counterattack, and that moment of hesitation is all Noel needs. Koga eventually decides to fight back and slashes at Noel's arm, but this is all going according to plan, which is why Noel let him slash his arm, and while Koga's sword was stuck, he pulled it away from him. Koga can't believe Noel would go that far for victory, but simply getting his sword away from him is nowhere near enough to stop Koga, so he pushes Noel away and runs to catch his sword before it even hits the ground. Koga then unleashes a slash that destroys the ice dome and sends Noel flying, but he isn't down yet, as he jumps out lands a killing blow on Noel. Or at least that's what he thought it was, but what he actually cut was an ice bullet Noel had stashed in his pocket, so the effects of the bullet caused Koga's body to freeze solid. Everything Noel had done up to this point was for the sole purpose of making Koga careless enough to fall for this trick. And now that Koga's body is frozen, Noel jumps up and lands a kick that knocks him out. Ever since Koga was a kid, he has never been able to fight back for himself because no one cared about him, but when he became a gladiator, he was forced to fight just to stay alive, and while he hated every minute of it, all those death battles made him stronger. However, no matter how strong he got, he was always still that weak-minded little kid who couldn't fight back for himself, so he has only ever been able to do what he is told. Noel was declared the victor of the match, and as Koga lies on the ground, he wishes he could be more strong-willed like Noel, because despite being a talker, he has never once let others trample on his freedoms or ideals. Koga's not going to be getting up for a while, but since the winner of the match has been decided, it looks like Albert has just lost all rights to call himself the leader of the Gambino family. Noel's job here is done, so he calls over to Finocchio and says he is leaving, so they are free to do whatever they want with Albert. Before Noel leaves, Leos compliments him on his incredible fighting ability and thanks him for finally getting rid of Albert, so he says that if there's ever a time when Noel needs help, he will be happy to offer any assistance he can. But Noel turns down the offer and says he doesn't want to associate himself with the Gambino family any longer. Noel and Alma head to a nearby building where Alma starts patching up his wounds, and she tells Noel he was being far too reckless in his fight. That final kick he delivered to Koga's chest was way too risky, because Koga could have easily countered it if he had been expecting it. Noel says everything worked out in the end, so she shouldn't be worrying about it, but Alam reminds him that fighting is her job, and Noel's job is to be the commander, so she doesn't want him to keep getting into reckless fights personally. Noel apologizes and promises that he won't do it again, so Alma tells him he can always rely on her when it comes to fighting. Just then, Finocchio walks into the room, and he congratulates Noel on doing such a good job, but there's something he wants to talk to him about. Noel asks if this has anything to do with the payment he's supposed to get for defeating Albert, because if so, he won't be allowing any discounts. But Finocchio laughs and says he would never try to bargain with such a thing because this was a really good deal for him. He got rid of an incompetent rival, and all without having to take on any personal risk, so Noel earned every bit of that $50 million, but there's something else he wants to talk about with Noel in private, so he asks Alma if she can leave the room for a bit. Noel tells Alma it's alright, so she leaves the room, and as soon as she is gone, Finocchio gets straight to the point and asks Noel to join his Luciano family. He promises to treat Noel well, and if he wants, Finocchio is even willing to make Noel the leader of the Gambino family. Noel finds the idea amusing, but he reminds Finocchio that he is only 16, so how could he possibly lead an entire family by himself? Finocchio tells him age is irrelevant in the matter. The only thing that's important is the fact that Noel has got the guts to do it. Noel admits that Finocchio is right about that, but Noel has already turned down this invitation once before, so Finocchio should know by now that there's no way Noel would ever serve under anyone. Finocchio asks Noel if he's sure about that answer, and Noel says he is sure, so Finocchio informs Noel that his class is an A-rank Punisher, and as such, he has access to a pretty interesting skill. All of a sudden, Noel realizes that something is terribly wrong, and as he looks up, he sees that Finocchio is literally holding his heart in the palm of his hand. Noel checks to make sure, and just as expected, he has no heartbeat in his chest, so Finocchio begins explaining how the skill works. The judgment skill allows him to remove the heart of his target against their will after they refuse a request from him twice. But even though Noel has no heart right now, he is still alive because the heart is still spatially linked to his body. However, if Finocchio steps more than 5 meters away from Noel or crushes his heart, Noel will die. Finocchio thinks Noel is a little too talented to be left on his own because he will eventually become a problem for the Finocchio family. Noel asks if Finocchio intends to kill him before it becomes a possible threat, and that's exactly what Finocchio intends to do, but he is willing to give Noel one last chance. so he asks him again to join the Luciano family. At this, Noel laughs and says he will never agree to that. He gets up, so Finocchio tells him trying to fight is pointless because his heart won't go back into his chest unless Finocchio dispels the skill. However, this doesn't stop Noel as he continues approaching Finocchio and declares that he will indeed become the greatest seeker that has ever lived, so great in fact that the Luciano family would never be able to touch him. So with that in mind, Finocchio has the right idea when he says the best thing to do is kill him now. He encourages Finocchio to do it, but he also reminds him that the second he does it, he will be admitting that he is a coward. He is so scared of Noel that he decided to kill him while he is still weak, rather than have to deal with him once he becomes strong. Whether Finocchio chooses to kill him now or not, Noel makes it clear that he will bow down to no one. So even though Finocchio is the one holding Noel's heart in his hand, Noel has managed to grip Finocchio's heart with fear. Finocchio backtracks and says he was only kidding about killing him, so he returns Noel's heart to his chest. He then apologizes for the misunderstanding and turns to head out, but before he leaves, he reminds Noel that he can't take back what he has said, so he better makes it to the top of the world of Seekers for real. Finocchio then leaves, and as he is walking out, he locks eyes with Alma, who looks like she's on the verge of murdering him after that little stunt he pulled in there, but she doesn't do anything, so he keeps walking and returns to his carriage where Albert is being held. As soon as Albert spots Finocchio, he begins begging for his life because he doesn't want to be killed, and Finocchio finds it a little annoying to look at Albert's pitiful face, but he has a good idea, so he says he won't kill Albert. But he does ask him if he has ever seen the Human Centipede movie, so it's clear that Albert is in for a terrible time now that Finocchio has him. The next day, Noel meets with Koga and shows him that he is now in possession of the contract of subordination that binds him as a slave. Koga thinks this means Noel wants to become his master, but Noel says he has no use for a slave like him. It's true that Koga is decently powerful, but compared to the rest of the Seekers in this world, he is still pretty much a weakling. And more importantly, Noel wishes to stand atop the world of Seekers, so he doesn't have time to take care of a weak little puppy because what he needs is a fierce wolf. He hands Koga the contract and tells him he's a free man, so he can do whatever he wants now. And now that he's free, Noel asks him what he wants to do. Koga has spent his whole life being used by others, so when given the opportunity to be free, he doesn't really know what to do with himself. But he does know one thing, and that's the fact that he wants to be by Noel's side to watch him achieve his dream. So if Noel needs a fierce wolf, then that's what he will become. He asks Noel to allow him to join Blue Beyond, and Noel is more than happy to have Koga on the team. A little while later, the party heads out on their first mission, and their overall teamwork is nearly flawless. Noel gives the commands and provides support, Koga cuts through the enemy forces, and Alma clears a path for him to do so. They are a well-oiled machine, but as Koga tries to chop off the head of the monster general, Alma comes in and steals his kill, so the two start arguing over it. Noel steps in and tells them both to knock it off since they are all on the same team. He tells Alma to stop acting out on the battlefield since it messes up their teamwork, but he also reminds Koga that there are no kill counts here, so he shouldn't be getting so upset over Alma stealing his kill. That aside, this was a really good outcome for their first quest as a party of 3, so Noel says that as soon as they get back to Etria, he's going to apply for them to become a clan. As a clan, they will officially be recognized by the state, meaning they will be able to take on quests without having to go through any intermediaries or pay any commissions. As he says this, Koga notices something on Noel's arm, so he points it out, and Noel realizes it's the mark that means he can rank up to B rank. This is great news since alongside his team, it brings him one step closer to his goal of becoming the strongest 7-star Regalia Seeker. A couple of years ago, Noel was having a meeting with the guild supervisor, Harold Jenkins, and he was here to discuss business matters with Noel. After his grandpa died, Noel inherited the family winery, and it has been doing pretty well so far, but Noel intends to step down as the owner pretty soon because he has other things he wants to focus on. Anyway, getting down to business, Noel wants to know why Harold would want to meet with him so suddenly, so he goes straight to the point and shows Noel a picture of Monster Lord that appeared a few days ago, and he suspects that it may be the same one that destroyed Noel's village and killed his grandpa. Noel is shocked, but he had his suspicion that the Lord might have survived that fight because on the day of the tragedy, there were 2 things missing from the battlefield: the Lord's body and Overdeath's axe. He asks the guild supervisor if the monster has been dealt with, so the supervisor tells him that a major clan was sent out to take care of the Lord, but they were all wiped out, and by the time they sent the Supreme Dragon after it, the Lord had already returned to the Void. The fact that the monster returned to the Void is pretty alarming because monsters usually invade this world because of their overwhelming instinct to conquer it, but the Lord must be manifesting itself with clear intentions. After its second appearance, it is believed that this thing might have reached the level of the Valiants from the 13th layer of the Abyss. There are currently 10 known Valiants, and each one of them is said to be capable of wiping out the entire world if left unchecked. Although the last time a Valiant manifested itself in their world was 40 years ago, and for the first time in Herman history, it was actually defeated by Noel's grandpa. Up until that point, everyone thought the best they could do was force the Valiants back into the Abyss if they came through, but Overdeath proved that defeating it was possible. Still, he is worried that the appearance of the Lord might cause another great catastrophe. After hearing all this, the look on Noel's face wasn't one of fear, but rather one of determination to become strong enough to take that Lord down if he ever encounters it. Harold recognizes that look in Noel's eyes as the same one that Overdeath had since he was good friends with him while he was alive. He tells Noel he can't wait to see what kind of seeker he's going to become in the future. And back in the present, Harold sees Noel and his friends walking up to his office. Once Noel and the others get in, Koba is feeling really nervous since he is worried he might say something wrong and get them rejected, but Noel assures him that this is just an evaluation for their clan formation request, so they are just going to be asked a bunch of simple questions, and Noel is absolutely sure they will be accepted. Just then, they feel a terrifying presence at the door, so they all instinctively react and get into battle position, but it turns out that it was just Harold. He says that there's no need for them to be so nervous and tells Noel it's nice to see him again. He is the one in charge of reviewing their clan application, so he sits down across from the group and begins reading off their report. It looks like they already acquired a clan house as well as the 20 million for the security deposit, so it's clear that they thought this through before applying. Noel adds that he plans to rank up to B rank immediately after his clan is approved, and so does Alma, although Koba hasn't met the requirements for a rank up yet. Harold acknowledges that, but he asks why the party name on the paperwork isn't Blue Beyond, so Noel tells him that he intends to change the name of the party when the clan is formed, and Harold has no problem with that, so he says he is done with the interview. Koga is surprised that it was so easy to pass the interview, but Harold corrects him and says they didn't pass the interview because he's rejecting their application. Elsewhere, in an abyss, a party is left in utter shock as they witness a single man take down a monster from a 12th-layer abyss all by himself. Although this man is the vice commander of the Supreme Dragon 1-star Regalia party, Zeke Feinstein, so this was actually a pretty tame battle for him. Back to Noel and the others, Koga is shocked to hear that they are being rejected, so he gets up and asks Harold why. Harold wants to be transparent with them, so he says the guild is currently only accepting stronger seekers for clans, so meeting the requirements to form a clan isn't enough to be accepted anymore. Koba doesn't think that's fair, but just before he starts complaining, Noel cuts him off and asks Harold what caused this sudden change in policy. Harold isn't supposed to be giving out this information, but over on the west border, there has been some strange mana flow occurring, and it's just a matter of time until it reaches a critical state and erupts to form an abyss. Estimates suggest they have about a year before this happens, but when it does happen, a massive abyss will spawn, and that means a Depth 13 Valiant is going to spawn. Koba asks if there's any way to stop this from happening, but the mana flowing in the earth is a very delicate system, so if they try to disrupt it, they could end up causing an even worse disaster. Alma asks if there's any way for them to kill the Valiant then, and Harold says it's possible, but it would require the joint effort of all the 1-, 2-, and 3-star regalias combined, and even then, as someone who has first-hand experience with Valiants, Hard isn't sure they will be able to win. That's why the guild is only interested in accepting seekers who are already capable of engaging in a fight of that level, because they don't have time or resources to waste on training rookies at the moment. Koga says that's way too unfair, but Noel says there is nothing they can do about it since they don't meet the conditions that the guild is looking for, so he gets up without any arguments and says it's time for them to leave. As they leave, Koga asks Noel if he's really going to give up on his dreams so easily, but Noel never said he was giving up. He simply wants to take full advantage of an opportunity that just presented itself. While the appearance of a Valiant is an event that could possibly wipe out all of humanity, it is also an incredibly fortunate thing. For example, the living conditions in Etria rose dramatically after Koshutis was defeated 40 years ago, because the gem from the monster was used to make a magic device that creates purified water for the entire nation. When stronger monsters are defeated, more advanced magical engineering is developed, resulting in large boosts in the standard of living. That's why Seekers are seen as heroes by the people, because they can turn unpredictable disasters into blessings, and Noel plans to turn this unpredictable disaster around in his favor, so he tells the others that they have to become recognized as a regalia as soon as possible. Koga is shocked when he hears Noel say this because they haven't even become a clan yet, and Noel is already talking about becoming a regalia. Alma isn't as surprised and believes Noel will be able to pull it off somehow, But then Noel says they are going to need to become a regalia in less than 6 months, and even she doesn't think that's possible. Noel explains that the time frame is so short because he plans to gain enough experience to become recognized as a regalia, and then, ideally, they will be asked to join the fight against the Valiant, and if they manage to pull it off, their names will go down in history as some of the strongest Seekers ever. But to accomplish all this, they need to have a lot of experience and accomplishment under their belt by the time they actually become a clan. And the fastest way to do that is to achieve something so spectacular that it grabs the attention of the public. And it looks like Noel already has the perfect plan in mind. The first thing he does is go to his rank up to a strategist, and after the process has been completed, as a strategist, Noel now possesses enhanced cognitive abilities that will allow him to analyze battles in real time and give orders based on his predictions. After he's done, Noel heads out into the street, and he just so happens to run into Zeke while he's being praised by the public for his recent Abyss raid. As soon as Zeke notices Noel, he goes over to him, and Noel is a bit cautious about this interaction since Zeke is one of the only 3 people to reach X rank. The other 2 are Leo, the leader of the Kingslayer clan, and the other is Victor, the current leader of the Supreme Dragons. Zeke seems interested in Noel and asks if he was the one who overthrew the Gambino family a couple of days ago, but Noel tries to play dumb and says he doesn't know anything about that. However, Zeke is fooled by Noel's act and is already aware of how capable he is, so Noel gives up on playing dumb and asks Zeke what he wants. Zeke says he wants to recruit Noel into his clan, but before he's even done speaking, Noel cuts him off and says he refuses to work under anyone. Zeke can tell by the look in Noel's eyes that he is firm on that decision, but at the same time, Zeke is the kind of guy who is willing to do whatever it takes to get what he wants, even if it means using force. Noel tells him he is welcome to use as much force as he wants, but if Noel were ever going to follow orders from someone, he would have to recognize that person as the strongest. Victor is pretty old already, so he is well past his prime, so that leaves Zeke and Leo as the top Seekers. And if Zeke wants to lead Noel, he is going to have to prove that he is stronger than Leo. However, there's no way Zeke could ever actually do that, since if he and Leo fought, one of them would be guaranteed to die as a result. Noel doesn't care though and tells Zeke he will only have the right to recruit him once he has proven that he is the strongest. As Noel leaves, 2 random guys turn around the corner, and when they see Zeke, one of them makes the unfortunate mistake of calling Zeke the 2nd strongest Seeker in the nation, and it absolutely sets Zeke off. Zeke walks over to the guy and asks him why he just said that, so the guy tries to explain that everyone just thinks Leo is stronger because he has cleared more abysses than Zeke has. But that's not what Zeke wanted to hear, so he launches the guy hundreds of feet into the air. Noel was listening in on that whole exchange, and now he knows that Zeke is sensitive about people calling him the 2nd strongest, but he's going to have to hurry up and form his clan before Zeke becomes even more of a problem for him. Meanwhile, Alma and Licia are out in the forest doing some combat training, and Licia is absolutely demolishing Alma throughout the entire thing. After Licia pins Alma down with an arrow to her neck, they decide to take a break, and Licia tells Alma that she needs to work on her situational awareness. She tends to get too heated in a battle and lose sight of the big picture, which is pretty much the exact opposite of Noel's calm and collected leadership. Alma thinks she should just leave the decision-making to Noel then, and Licia agrees with her because everyone in a party has their own specialties, and she's sure Noel will make good use of Alma's skill. Just then, one of Licia's friends, Ophelia, comes running up to her, and she's really glad they happen to run into each other here. Ophelia has never met Alma before, so she asks Licia about her, and Licia says Alma is a friend of hers and she was just out here helping Alma train a little. Ophelia's party is called the Winged Knights, and they have 4 members on their team, including Kame the Lancer, Vaclav the Summoner, and their dependable leader, Leon. Ophelia offers to help Alma if she ever needs something, since a friend of Licia is a friend of hers, and as her friend, she wants to give Alma some advice and tells her to stay away from the man named Noel Stalin. From what he has heard, Noel sold off his own teammates as slaves and has been making deals with the Mafia. After everything he has done, Ophelia is sure he must be an evil scumbag, but Leon stops her rant and tells her it's not nice to judge people based on rumors, especially when she has never actually met Noel before. Ophelia apologizes for going too far, but it's time for a party to go, so they start heading back to town. Once they are gone, Licia apologizes to Alma for what Ophelia said about Noel, but Alma doesn't really mind since most of what she said actually happened. Later that night, Noel meets up with Loki because he asked him to gather some information earlier, and Loki presents him with a list of parties that have recently risen to B rank. At the top of the list, there's a party called Winged Knights, and they are pretty outstanding in both achievement and public image. Their leader Leon has a spotless record, and part of his charm is the fact that he is such a kind person. Unfortunately, Noel is aiming for the top of B rank, so if Leon and his party are number 1 right now, he is going to have to do whatever it takes to surpass them. And the first thing on the agenda is to recruit a new party member, so he goes to visit Hugo Capilia in prison. Hugo is called out of his prison cell and brought to a room where he can talk with Noel, and Noel is disappointed to see that Hugo has lost weight since the last time he came here. If he doesn't eat the food here, he's going to end up starving to death, and that's the last thing Noel would want to happen. Noel has had his eyes on Hugo for a long time now because he's an incredibly skilled puppeteer. He is currently locked up awaiting execution after being accused of a heinous murder, but while he was a free man, he was legendary. A puppeteer is a class that combines both production and combat prowess, so Hugo was able to fight in all kinds of situations by controlling various puppets, so he built an outstanding reputation for himself as a freelance seeker, but that also meant he was a lone wolf with no one on his side. At one point, Hugo quit being a seeker and decided to become a puppet maker instead, and he was pretty good at it, but then his life was derailed when he got arrested. He tells Noel that there's no point in trying to recruit someone like him since nothing will stop the prison from executing him. However, Noel has a plan to get Hugo out of here, and to prove it, he snaps his fingers and demands a cup of tea from one of the guards. Surprisingly, the guard does as he is told, and at first, Hugo thinks Noel might have bribed the guards, but Noel corrects him and says he's just blackmailing him. Pretty much all the guards will listen to whatever command he gives right now, so Noel tells Hugo that he's serious about freeing him. Hugo is a bit conflicted since while he would certainly love to be a free man again, he doesn't want to join Noel because he hates Seekers as a whole. From his experience, Seekers are just a bunch of violent idiots who lie about their strength all the time, but Noel is arguably worse than all the others. He is cunning, merciless, and would commit any number of atrocities to make sure his goal is achieved. Noel takes that as a compliment and gets up to leave, but before he does, he turns back to Hugo and tells him he won't give up until Hugo is part of his team. After leaving the prison, Noel takes Alma and Koga to the Rock Hard Tavern and says they will be meeting up here from now on. Koga is a bit hesitant to go in since this place is meant for only B-rank seekers, but since Noel and Alma are already B-rank, their party meets the requirements, so it should be fine. As soon as Noel and the others walk in, all eyes are on them since this is their first time here, but this one big guy is feeling particularly offended by the new group's presence, so he walks up to Noel looking to cause trouble. First, he calls Noel a bitch for having such a pretty, scarless face, but Noel counters and says the only reason Edgar has so many scars is because he's an incompetent fighter. At this point, Edgar is ready for a fight, but Noel has a secret weapon to stop him and proceeds to state Edgar's home address, the fact that Edgar's wife is pregnant, and even the name he decided for his baby. Edgar is shocked and asks how Noel knows all this, but Noel doesn't answer him and instead starts talking about how much of a shame it would be if Edgar's house suddenly caught fire with his pregnant wife inside. But if he still wants to fight, then he is more than welcome to throw the first punch. Edgar isn't willing to risk his family's safety, so he backs away from Noel, and while Noel's still got the attention of everyone in the bar, he introduces himself to make sure no one messes with him again. The group then sits down by the bar, but Noel reminds them that they aren't just here to eat and drink, they've got an objective to fulfill. And as luck would have it, their objective walks right a moment later. As the Wing Knights head for their table, Ophelia notices Alma at the bar and she's surprised to see her here. Noel uses his telepathic talker skill to ask Alma how she knows Ophelia, so Alma explains that she ran into Ophelia while training, but they only met once, so it's not like they are friends or anything. She also warns Noel that Ophelia pretty much hates him, but that's good news for Noel since it makes instigating a fight with her a lot easier. He seizes the opportunity and introduces himself to Ophelia as Noel Stalin, and the second she hears that name, the smile on her face disappears. She starts yelling at Noel for doing something as evil as selling his own party members off as slaves, but Noel tells her he regrets nothing and he'd gladly do it again under the same circumstances. Hearing Noel say this makes Ophelia so angry that she tries to attack him, but before she could get close, Koga grabs her hand and warns that if she wants to get to Noel, then she's going to have to go through him first, and he's more than willing to draw his sword if he has to. Just then, Leon notices the commotion and comes over to check if Ophelia is alright, but Noel tells him that Ophelia is the one at fault here. She just attempted to attack him out of nowhere, so it's natural that his party would defend him. Now that he says it out loud, Ophelia realizes how bad her actions sound, so she apologizes to Leon for losing her cool like this, and in turn, Leon apologizes to Noel on behalf of his party member. Noel says it's fine since you can't blame an idiot for doing idiotic things, but Leon doesn't appreciate Noel insulting his party member. While Ophelia may have acted out a little, that doesn't give Noel the right to call her an idiot, but Noel pretty much tells Leon he's an arrogant piece of shit if he thinks he has any right to go tell Noel how to behave. Leon gets angry, but he doesn't want to end up crashing out, so he turns around and leaves with the rest of his party. After Leon is gone, Koba asks Noel if it was really necessary to go that far since Leon looked like he was genuinely trying to apologize back there, but this is all a part of Noel's plan. He fills Koga and Alma in on the details, and after listening to him, they are both shocked by how nasty Noel's plan is, but Noel explains to them that it's eat or be eaten out here in the Seeker world. But it's not necessarily the weak ones who lose, it's the ones who become overconfident who meet their downfall. And Noel intends to use Leon and his party as stepping stones for his own growth. Meanwhile, over in Harold's office, his granddaughter asks him who he'd like the raid captain to be for the Valiant Abyss that's coming. Harold tells her it's rude to talk to him like that because even if he's her grandpa, he is still her superior. But Marion doesn't care and asks him to just answer the question. Personally, she thinks the raid captain should be Leo Aiden, even if he's a lazy bastard. His strength is second to none. There's also Zeke to consider, but Marion really doesn't think Zeke can match up to Leo's strength. Harold says he thinks Noel will become the raid captain, but Marion thinks Harold must be joking since he already rejected Noel's application to form a clan, but even so, Harold is confident Noel will find a way to pull it off. He's so confident, in fact, that he's willing to make a little bet with Marion over it. If Leo becomes the raid captain, then Harold is willing to let Marion become the head of the Jenkins family. What if Noel manages to become raid captain instead, then Marion has to attend etiquette school. Marion doesn't like the idea of having to sit through etiquette school, but she is not one to turn down a bet, so she agrees. Later that night, Keem is walking down the street when he notices two drunk buddies talking about their future, and it reminds him of his childhood with Leon. Leon has always been a pure-hearted guy, but that often led to him getting bullied by the delinquents of his village since they hated how he constantly snitched on them. Leon felt it was the right thing to do since the delinquents were stealing stuff, but the delinquents refused to acknowledge their wrongdoing and intended to beat him up some more, but before they could, Keem came to his rescue. The bullies ran away the second they saw Keem, and Keem asks Leon why he didn't fight back against them. His class is his swordsman, so he would easily have knocked all the bullies out in no time, but Leon didn't think it was right to return violence with violence. Keem saw that Leon was serious about wanting to do the right thing, so he suggests the two of them should become Seekers. After all, there's nothing more righteous than ridding the world of the monsters that come from the Abyss. Years later, they formed their party and were fighting a monster in the forest, but Leon couldn't finish it off because Keem was holding the monster back. If he used his finishing move, then he might accidentally hit Keem in the process, but Keem tells him there's no need to worry about him since he will just dodge out of the way at the last second. Leon was hesitant, but since Keem seemed so confident he could make it out, he went in for his finishing slash and completely obliterated the monster, clearing the Abyss. This was the first time their party had ever actually cleared a level 7 Abyss, but while the others were celebrating, Leon ran to check on Keem to make sure he was alright. Thankfully, Keem was alright, and he was sure this victory would help their party move up in the world. They were initially called Twilight Glint, but that name kinda sucked, so people started calling them Wingmates instead as a reference to Leon's ultimate move. So there's no doubt that Leon is what makes their party so special. Back to the present, Keem is at a bar with Leon and asks why he got so heated when he confronted Noel earlier. Leon doesn't really understand why he was so upset, but Keem figures it must be jealousy. After all, Noel became a Seeker recently, yet he has already achieved B rank and is acting all high and mighty. Leon realizes he really is jealous of Noel, but that doesn't mean he is sour about it. He can respect the hard work and determination Noel must have to have risen through the ranks so quickly. Keem is glad Leon was able to resolve his feelings, but even if he accepts that Noel is talented, that doesn't mean they should just sit back and let Noel surpass them. He pulls out a letter he had received from the guild saying that all capable parties should form a clan, and he thinks this is a great opportunity for them to grow as a party. The others in the party also got the same letter, including Leon, which is what he intended to discuss when he invited everyone to the bar earlier, but then the incident with Noel happened, and he ended up leaving early. Everyone already agreed to go with whatever Leon decides, so Leon says he wants to form a clan, and the next day, he and Keem head to the guild to submit their application. However, Harold rejects them. Leon doesn't understand why since his party meets all the requirements to form a clan, and Harold admits that under any other circumstances, Leon's party would have been accepted. But a Valiant will be appearing in a year's time, so the guild is only offering clan titles to parties who are capable of fighting immediately. Keem says that won't be a problem since his party is more than capable of fighting in the raid. In fact, they've recently taken down a level 7 Abyss by themselves. But if that's the case, Harold asks why they didn't apply to become a clan immediately after their monumental victory. The issue here is the fact that Leon's party isn't serious about becoming stronger, and without that obsessive drive, they won't be able to improve enough to fight the Valiant in a year's time. Keen gets angry and asks why Harold sent them this letter if he was just going to reject them. But Harold takes one look at it and tells the two that he never sent out such a letter, so this must be a fake someone sent as a prank. Since there's nothing left to discuss, Harold says their interview is over, but before he walks away, Leon pleads with him for a second chance to prove that his party has what it takes to become a clan. So Harold says he will accept them if they can complete a test. The test is to defeat a level 8 Abyss monster, and if they can do that, Harold will acknowledge them. However, there's another party who begged for a second chance. So this test will be a competition between Leah's party and Noel Stalin's party. This was the end of episode 10. Subscribe to not miss the next part.